Welcome back to Placed on the 55 with Jon and Jess. We're on our way into week 7. Jess, how was last week 6 for you?
Well, pretty good. I was 3-1, and we were both 10-10 last week. So I believe I'm now 13-11 on the season, and you went 2-2, I believe. So you're 12-12, which is both fairly respectable. No one's lost any money so far.
Yeah, you're above 500. You're doing well. The game that you missed out on was the Thursday night game, Toronto versus Montreal, and a big surprise. Fajaro went out with an injury early on, and Toronto just seemed to take advantage and capitalize.
What a huge upset. So, yeah, Toronto was 37-18 at McGill. No one expected that, I don't think. The Alouettes were favored by 6.5. I think we both took the Alouettes on that game.
I took Toronto on that game. That's the one that helped me get to 2-2.
Did you?
Yeah, the only 2 games I won this week were Toronto and BC.
Finishing up on the Toronto game, if they're looking that good against Montreal, they're going to get Chad Kelly back in a few weeks. How good are the Bowmen going to look? They get last year's most outstanding player back.
Do you think as an organization they're going to welcome Chad Kelly back?
Pinball Clemens sort of hinted something like that, but it was also subject to an ongoing investigation and review to figure out exactly what happened. It looks like, as far as the league is concerned, Kelly will serve his 9-week suspension and he'll be able to play it in week 10. Now, if the Argos deem something happened that deserves further suspension, well, they're obviously able to do that.
Week 10, it's right around the corner. We're a third of the way through the season. I think we're approaching that time of year in the season where upsets start to come to the surface. Games that look like no-brainers all of a sudden become upsets for whatever reason, either outstanding play or, like Thursday night's game, injury.
Well, it was probably the best game of the week was Calgary at Winnipeg. You were super PO'd about potential pass interference call at the very end of the game.
Don't call it pass interference. Call it accidental pass interference. Just the phrasing of it on its own sounds like an oxymoron. And the thing that bugs me even more than that is that there was no call on the field at all, and they throw a challenge flag. And it's been bothering me for the first 6 weeks of this season, how there's just no call, and the coach throws a challenge flag and is like, I think you missed something. If you make a call as a ref or linesman and it's a bad call, the coach should have an opportunity to correct that. But if you miss a call and there's no call made, you can't just throw the flag because it benefits you.
I disagree completely. That's the whole point of having replays. When the refs miss a call, the review is there for the coaches to use if they think the refs missed a call. It could have been any good coach. I would credit Wally Buono, paraphrasing him, or even Bill Belichick. But like they say, a football game is never, ever won or lost on one single play. Jake Meyer, the Stampeders quarterback, said after the game that he blamed the loss on himself as he threw a pick 6 at the very end of the first half with barely any time left. There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into losing or winning a football game. It's not just done on one particular play or one particular call that the refs made. Honestly, that was accidental pass interference. Like, you can't just stumble around and trip some guy by accident and then the guy doesn't get to catch the pass. That's the whole point of the penalty.
I'm complaining because I think the whole tossing of the flag is Bush League, and I don't agree with it. And I think if there's a call, you either challenge it or you accept it. You don't just start throwing the flag because you decide, it didn't work in my favor. Maybe I can get lucky and throw this flag and tables will turn, which they did.
But John, you're thinking like, okay, O'Shea throws that flag, and if he's wrong, then the Bombers get penalized. It's not like he just gets to throw it out just for fun. It wasn't on purpose. It was accidental, but it still happened. When the Bombers actually went down the field, scored a touchdown, and I'm like, oh, awesome. Now they're up, 39-37. And I'm thinking, awesome. We're going to kick an extra point. The spread was 2.5, so we just need to get to 3. And then they line up for a 2-point conversion to go ahead by 4, and kind of makes sense for them. But I'm like, you guys are going to fuck up the spread. What are you doing? Just kick the extra point.
It's so funny when you're watching games and you're worried about the spread and you're like, oh my gosh, there's too much time left. They're going to go kick a meaningless field goal and screw it all up. That's what makes spread betting so difficult.
Yeah, and you sort of wonder if the coaches know about the spread, but they don't care.
I was kind of surprised that you said that was the most exciting game because for me, it was the BC game. Not because it was a close score, but watching Vernon Adams and McInnes put on that show, I think by the end of the first half, they had close to 300 yards in passing. McInnes ended the game with 240 on 14 catches. Like, he was just on fire. And he had to come out a couple times because of cramps. And you sort of like stop breathing for a second. You're like, oh, is he hurt?
Yeah, I was kind of worried about that.
And then the commentators were talking about how they're getting back another receiver, like some other superstar who's been out due to injury. And they just seem like they're drowning in riches right now, the BC Lions.
Going into game 3 last week, we both had BC to watermelon smash the Riders, and they did, 35-20, easily covering the spread by 6.5 points. The crowd looked amazing. They definitely sold out the lower bowl and opened up the upper bowl. It looked like a really electric crowd to be down there.
I wonder how hot it was in BC Place. They opened the roof, but you could see that one end zone. It was in the sun, and if you were sitting there, it would be toasty.
But good comment about that roof being open and how good it looked on television, that most of the field seemed to be covered in sun, and that just looks so much better. And so that's why I think the Lions can get away with playing games at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You go back to the old BC Place and put a game at 4 o'clock in the afternoon when you're in a dome and it's stuffy. It was a air-controlled dome. There was no fresh air coming in. It sucked. And the fact that now they actually have that roof open, even though it's not a full retractable roof, but it's open enough that the wind blows around, even though it would have been 30 some odd degrees, I think it would have been enjoyable. I was looking at that. I had season tickets last year, and I had tickets in the opposite end zone, in the family zone. And I was thinking, if I'd done it again this year, I want to be in that far section that gets the sun.
It was hot on the field, man. It was really exciting watching the BC Lions just tear up the mediocre Saskatchewan Roughriders. Your words, not mine.
You kind of took the piss out of me last week for calling them mediocre at 4-0, and now they're 4-1.
Should we touch on the final game of the week?
The final game of the week was probably second best. Edmonton just tied up the game with 10 seconds left to make it 34-34. And then their kicker somehow, I don't know, the special teams coach told him to do it or whatever. But instead of doing a squib kick, he does a regular kick, which bounced out of bounds. And in the CFL, that's a penalty. And then the ball was placed on the Ottawa 50-yard line. The Ottawa's throw down the field with it took only 8 seconds. They throw a pass, then Ottawa lines up, kicks a field goal. They win 37-34. They cover the 2.5 points, so I got that one. The Elks, as their coach said after the game, Chris Jones says, we just create a way to not win games. It's a bad loss.
It is a bad loss. They've had a lot of them. They've just come up a little short all year, and that's why they're 0-5 now. So there was a player on the Ottawa side, Pimpleton. Mm-hmm. Great name, all name crowd. He is fast, like fast. He caught a ball on a crossing route and took off, and nobody could catch him. He had 143 yards on 4 catches. He's the name to watch in week 7, and we'll see, because it's going to be another rematch of these two teams to start off the weekend.
So yeah, going into week 7, we have to mention that this week's spreads are courtesy of Dick Rogers Bar, Grill, and Riverside Casino, located along the Columbia River in Trail, BC. And as they say out in Trail, when it comes to Dick Rogers Bar, Grill, and Riverside Casino, you better Dick Rogers before Rogers dicks you.
I guess.
All right, so...
I guess.
His name is Dick Rogers.
Yes.
Going into week 7, no Thursday game this week, but we got a doubleheader on Friday. A rematch of between the Edmontons and Ottawa, this time at Ottawa. And I like the Red Blacks to keep rolling. I know Edmonton's going to be desperate with Sunday's finish, but still, it's going to be should be a great game, I would imagine.
Yeah, I think it will be a pretty exciting game. Ottawa looks like a fun team. They've put on some entertaining games. Pimpleton, I think, is exciting. Their quarterback, he's played well. Edmonton gets 2.5. They're 0-5. They've had close games. I'm going to have to go Edmonton on this one.
Ah, sweet.
MBT has one of those weird stats where he's getting high yards for the season, lots of completions. His completion percentage is pretty decent, but the team, they're just finding ways to lose.
For the Edmonton's perspective, I hope you're right, but I'm still taking Ottawa with giving up 2.5 points.
Are these doubleheader games going to be the norm now for the rest of the season?
Not until after Labor Day. I'm not really sure why there's not a Thursday game this week, but come Labor Day when the NFL starts, they won't play games on Sunday anymore, and you'll see probably doubleheaders on Friday and doubleheaders on Saturday.
Well, it'll make for a long Friday.
Second half of that doubleheader on Friday, we got Winnipeg favored by just 1.5 at Taylor Field in Regina. Saskatchewan hasn't lost at home in a while, and I'm kind of going against my gut a bit because I think Mike O'Shea will have his horses together, but I'm not sure his horses are going to be good enough. So I'm going to take the Riders with a 3.5 point.
I'd like to see Winnipeg go 3-4. I like comeback stories, so if a team could start 0-4 and then finish with a winning record, that'd be pretty exciting to see. 1.5 points, it's not a lot. I agree after last week that Saskatchewan is a bit mediocre, which means I'm going to put my money on Winnipeg. We'll see if my gut benefits from your gut feeling.
Yeah, I know. I had a tough one with that, but I like the Riders at home. It's going to be a really good test because, like we were saying last week, Saskatchewan's somewhat mediocre 4-0 team. They got it handed to them last week in BC. So let's see what they can actually do against the Bombers, and that'll be a turning point, I think. So we get to know the Riders a little bit better and what they're doing.
I think they're going 4-2. That's what they're doing. Third game of the week, you got Toronto, led by Dukes, up against the Tabby Cats. It doesn't matter what I bet. You should just bet the opposite of me because I'm going to be wrong and you could be right. So should I go first on this one?
Just to let everyone know that Argos are 4.5 point favorites at Hamilton. What do you think, John?
Yeah, 4.5 points is meaningful. If the Tabbies are going to lose, yeah, why wouldn't they lose by 3 or 4 points and keep it close? They seem to be doing a lot of things right, except the one critical piece, which is winning a game. I'm going to say Toronto is going to win by more than 4.5. Chances are they're going to win by a lot.
What they did in Montreal last week is enough to give me confidence that they're going to beat up the Tabbies by 4.5.
Do you think they're in a spot right now where they could finish number 1 in the East?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be Toronto and Montreal 1 or 2 in the East. But I think it's going to be the turning point is when Chad Kelly comes back. And if he comes back and plays really well, and the Argos can already beat the crap out of the Alouettes without Chad Kelly, wow, the Argos are going to look really good.
I did say at the start of the show, though, that we're coming into upset season with Hamilton being as terrible as they are and Toronto looking as good as they are. I'm not going to be surprised when Hamilton wins and I'm wrong on this bet. Last game, week 7, Sunday night.
Yeah.
BC and Calgary.
The Lions are favored by 4.5 at Calgary. I love Dave Dickinson and his coaching that he's been doing. It. He's so into the game, so passionate. Like, he looks super pissed off about that accidental PIA call that we talked about last week. But, speaking of O'Shea's horses, I don't think Dickinson has enough horses to beat BC on Sunday. And I like the Lions to maul the Stampeders and clear that 4.5 spread.
Yeah, I think the Stampeders have a better chance than that. They've got a really strong run game. And BC, I think, has looked weak on the run protection. With 4.5 points and Mills at running back, I'll say Calgary is going to be able to make this one work for me. So I'm going to go with Calgary, take the 4.5.
Surprising.
Hey, have you ever noticed these records that I put up here in the background?
No, it looks like there's some chestless dude there behind you.
So I grab a couple random records from the shelf before each podcast, and I just make sure that they're 2 different ones. This week, I grabbed the Rolling Stones, Get Your Ya-Ya's Out, randomly, and I'm like, okay, that's not bad. And then the other one is Peter Frampton. That's the guy who's bearing his chest. And the name of his album is I'm In You.
No. That reminds me of a cool poster. I got a picture of this. I'll send it to you. That a place I sold in Whistler. And there was this poster, like from the 80s. And there was this super hot chick, lying on a couch. And it was for Lang ski boots. And if you remember, Langs were kind of infamous for being really tight boots. You had to have a fucking narrow foot to fit into a Lang boot properly. And so there's this hot chick wearing Lang ski boots on a couch, and the tagline at the bottom is Lang boots, soft on the inside.
I know the one, man. I've seen it.
You've seen the poster?
Oh yeah. First thing I learned in university doing marketing, sex sells, and does it ever. That shirt looks like you stole it.
I walked through when I came back from Arizona visiting my dad in January. I was wearing this shirt and the BC Lions windbreaker I was wearing a couple of weeks ago, and no hat. And it was like 1:30 in the morning, and I'm walking through Canada Customs, and they ask me all these regular questions and blah blah blah. And then the guy actually turns to me and says, "Just one last question." I'm like, "Okay." He's like, "Are you a coach for the BC Lions?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just a fan." And I wore this BC Lions stuff to an Arizona Cardinals game.
We don't have a whole lot more for this week. No fan mail. If you want to write the show, you can. It's placed on the 55pod@gmail.com. That was pretty great, Jess. Week 6 is gone. Week 7's coming. But it was good to go a whole 110 yards with you on this one. Talk to you week 8.
Right on, you got it.